But it goes into the 1800s. The 1800s. 1835, the Ohio Anti-Slavery Society in Zanesville holds its first meeting. Now, these are religious whites who are vehemently opposed to slavery. And by the 1840s, Ohio abolitionists like Levi Coffin helped thousands of slaves escape to freedom on what you now know as the Ohio Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman. Remember that one? You know Harriet Tubman, you read about her, but do you know everything else around it? She's a devout Christian. She's one of the best-known conductors of the Underground Railroad. This woman is a hero, miraculous. She not only escaped, she went back in and escorted 300 slaves to freedom. If I'm not mistaken, I hate to speak out of, I think she went back for her husband, and her husband was with another woman, and she's like, you're staying there, and she moved on. She was born into slavery in Maryland. She married a free slave, escaped to the north, risked everything, returned back to the south to save her family members. Then there's Harriet Beecher Stowe. Not only wrote about the experiences like Uncle Tom's Cabin and Trails of Slaves, but she and her husband, Calvin Stowe, a professor of biblical literature, sheltered slaves in their own home. Now, many people have probably already put this part together, but Ohio was not predominantly black. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So wait a minute. So now white people aren't all bad. It was the religious white people that woke up the nation of the rest of the white people as saying, what are you doing? It was the realization that this was wrong and that the parties, the two parties, weren't doing anything about it. They weren't going to stop this. The government wouldn't stop it because of commerce. And science was backing them up. So somebody suggested a new movement, a new party, a third party, if you will, destroyed the Whigs. It was called the Republican Party. The Republican Party doesn't mean then what it means now. The name was chosen because it alluded to equality, reminded people of Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican Party, small government. In 1860, the first Republican is elected, Abraham Lincoln. Firmly established the new party as a major political party in the United States. Because the other two weren't doing anything, another one came in and said, get out of our way, we'll do it. A party that was very much libertarian at the time. The party and president that brought the abolition of slavery. Now you'd think that you might hear that from time to time in the political discourse, but you don't. The secular humanists, the Democrats who believed in social justice, no, they took the nation by the hand, all the while fighting rich, white, Republican racists tooth and nail, and they don't talk about that. Led the nation down a path to Emancipation Proclamation. No, none of that could be further from the truth. It's this guy. It's this guy. And it's a group of religious people that finally say, you know what? Nobody's going to do anything, so we will. There are plenty of struggles and bloodshed along the path. And while the Civil War has been well chronicled, I'm going to share just a couple of stories with you before we end tonight and pick it up tomorrow around 1900 that I don't think you're familiar with. And that's coming up next. I know the Civil War has been covered a lot, but there's one part that you should know and that you may not. This is a great book. You should read this. The book's called Giants. It's about Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a slave who escaped and then finds his way to Abraham Lincoln. The two of them become very good friends. Douglass becomes the first black man to attend an inauguration at the White House. And he talks about Lincoln. Douglass said about Lincoln, I was never more quickly or more completely put at ease in the presence of a great man than that of Abraham Lincoln. When Douglass met with Lincoln again in August of 1864, Lincoln asked him to, in case the war wasn't a total Union victory, to prepare an effort to assist slaves escaping to the North. Well, prior to the meeting with Lincoln, Douglas had turned on the Constitution, and he had preached against the Constitution. He actually said that the U.S. Constitution was a slave document. Have you heard that today? Now here he is, an educated man, one of the most prominent men of the time, but he took it for granted, apparently listening to what others said about the Constitution, and he bought in. Well, then he actually read the Constitution himself. And afterwards, this is what he said. Frederick Douglass, quote, "The Constitution of the United States could not well have been designed at the same time to maintain and perpetuate a system of rapine and murder like slavery, especially as not one word could be found in the Constitution to authorize such a belief." Frederick Douglass understood then that what the Constitution, what it was trying to do, when it was applied properly, that it would be the key to freedom for all men. The conclusion of this story next. This is part 2 of the 3-part series, and we are leaving it here with this kind of idea. I'm only 3/5 a man. Frederick Douglass. I just told you that Frederick Douglass at first believed that about the Constitution, and then he read it. And then he read the Federalist Papers. He realized the Constitution was not a slave document after he looked into it, and he read it, and he read the Federalist Papers, and he understood the 3/5 clause. It dealt with representation, not a man's worth. Again, take it from Frederick Douglass in his own words. They framed the Constitution plainly with a view to the speedy downfall of slavery. They carefully excluded from the Constitution any and every word which could lead to the belief that they meant it for persons of only one complexion. That is Frederick Douglass, a hero, a former slave. He had that realization in 1863. How? He came to the conclusion that our founders were not rich, evil, selfish white men who just wanted to oppress people of color. They wanted to set them free. 147 years later, we are still retreading what he set right. How have we arrived at this place after so much we've been through together? After so much blood shed for freedom? So many from all races, risking and sacrificing so much, from all races doing the wrong thing and all races doing the right thing. Well, it takes us here. It takes us here to 1900. And we'll show you how we got from there to here tomorrow. Back in a minute with final thoughts. These are the things you have to look for. This is the formula of good and evil. Good when they're set against each other and they use their checks and balances, and evil when they collude. Commerce, religion, government, and science. We saw it here, 17th century, just to recap. Religion, they enslaved non-Christians. It's not color. Then the government orders a black man to life enslavement, our first real slave. The court reverses emancipation of Johnson's slave. This is a black man who owns the first black slave in America, right here. But it was the government that did it. Virginia, now there's a crisis because of tobacco, and we need more tobacco, and we've got to have slaves. They pass a law protecting landowners from slaves. That ends the indentured servants. You have Virginia enacting slave codes, and then it just keeps going. Again, we go into the 1800s, and it's all about money. It's all about government expansion. Science is saying, hey, these guys, they're not even the same as us. And you have a turning point of religion. Religion. You get here, here's a big watershed moment. Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. But now we're doing it to the Chinese. We're about to do it to everybody. Collusion. Commerce, religion, government, and science. Bit by bit, little by little, a nudge here and a nudge there, and we're done. Tomorrow you think you've seen evil. Oh man, wait until we get into the last 100 years. Do your own homework. Not a complete history, obviously. It's the best we can do with 41 minutes of television time tonight. We pick this up tomorrow about 1900. And also, next Saturday, a week from Saturday, 8/28 is there at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial as we restore honor and the truth about our country, warts and all. Be there. Don't miss it. From New York, good night, America.